Thanks to Colin Watt, Haunt23, Frankie Isaacs, Juan Carlos, and a few others for requesting this one. Frostbite on the Atari 2600. Also, stick around to the end of this episode for a special programming announcement. It's kind of important, at least I think it is, you might not, I don't know. Anyway, Frostbite. This was programmed by Steve Cartwright and released by Activision in 1983. Steve Cartwright also programmed Mega Mania along with Sequest on Atari, which is an underrated game that we need to get to at some point. So Frostbite is kind of a clever take on the massively popular Frogger that came out a few years prior, but I feel like it's different enough to be its own thing and not just a clone like some other games. In Frostbite, you take up the mantle as Frostbite Bailey, trademark, and your mission is to build igloos quickly enough so that you can take shelter in them before the freezing temperatures claim your life. You build igloos by jumping across these moving ice floes, similar to the upper portion of Frogger when the frog jumps across the floating logs in the water. But here's where it gets tricky. Instead of just trying to make it from one side to the other, your goal is to jump on as many of the ice floes as possible. Each time you land on an ice floe, you get points and it adds a block to your igloo. How does it add a block of ice to your igloo while you're still standing out in the middle of the water? Who knows? Mystical Atari powers, just accept it. However, each time you land on a row of the ice floes, they turn blue. You can still jump on them while they're blue, but you no longer get any points or blocks added to your igloo by doing so. You only get those if the ice floes are white. You can turn them all white again by turning all of them blue. The goal is to get your igloo built, and then the round ends when you safely run inside of it. So yeah, that's where it gets a little tricky because what you're really doing is jumping back and forth non-stop among these floating chunks of ice as quickly as possible so that you can keep adding blocks to your igloo, turning the ice floe sheets from blue to white to blue again, and of course there are plenty of workplace hazards. Snow geese, killer clams, Alaskan king crabs all try to knock Frostbite Bailey into the freezing water below. Eventually, a frickin' polar bear shows up and starts patrolling the coast, so you're not safe anywhere. Holy crap! If the polar bear catches Frostbite Bailey, classic Atari 2600 sound effects ensue. And of course, all of this is up against a time clock. Although instead of an actual timer, this is a temperature gauge. Whenever you start a round, this starts out at 45 degrees, and ticks down a degree at a time. If the temperature gets to 0 before Frostbite Bailey gets his igloo built, you die. Although most of the game consists of jumping, which you do with the joystick, the button does have a purpose. If you push it, the ice floe you're standing on will change direction. However, this costs you a block off of your igloo, so you would only want to use that as a last resort, and it adds a little bit of strategy to the game. You start the game with 3 lives, or what the manual calls reserves, and every time you get 5,000 points, you get an extra reserve. You get bonus points each time you finish a round, as well as extra points for however many degrees are left on the temperature gauge. And you can pick up bonus points if you catch some fish along the way. As with most Activision games, if you rack up enough points, in this case 40,000 points, take a picture of your TV screen and send it in so that you will get a slick-looking patch solidifying your place in Frostbite Bailey's Arctic Architects. So, I have to confess, I never played this one growing up. Pardon the pun, but I am going into this one totally cold. It's a fascinating game though, and I have to say the simple gameplay is highly addictive. The game definitely gets challenging and it forces you to move quickly. That's my one tip for this game, is just to move fast. It's definitely not a slow, methodical game. 100% action. The jumping actually feels a bit more in line with Q*bert and not Frogger. And in fact, a lot of people at the time made that comparison. You can jump at a diagonal and in fact, even control your jumping a little bit while you're in the air. This is a useful trick to master too, as it helps for narrowly jumping around crabs or birds. The game really does play incredibly smooth. In an interview published on RetroGamer.net, Steve Cartwright says the main reason for this was that they rigorously playtested the game in QA, more so than just about any other Activision game had been playtested at the time. It really paid off. This is one of those games that you can just kind of let your eyes glaze over and totally get into the zone with, where you're just playing on raw gaming instinct. It's a lot of fun. Later in that same interview, Cartwright mentions again drawing inspiration from Frogger, but he also said that one of the early ideas for the game was actually to have the Frostbite Bailey character be jumping across rocks along a lava flow, before eventually settling on the frozen Alaska setting. The idea of seeing this all in red does sound pretty cool, but I gotta say the visuals in this game are really well done, and I especially like how the game changes time of day as you progress through the levels. There really is a lot going on here. Heck, in later stages, the ice floes actually split in half. Seriously, on the surface this game seems so simple, but it really is impressive to see in action, and I highly recommend giving it a shot. It goes for about 10 to 15 bucks as a loose cartridge, and is a welcome addition to any Atari 2600 collection. There's also a very well done looking homebrew port of this game for the Commodore 64, coded by Antonio Savona. I'll put links to all of this in the description if you want to check it out. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you that have supported the show over the years. Here's to the last 5.5 years, and here's to many more years of Friday Night Arcade ahead. Seriously, thanks guys for all of the support over the years. It means the world. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.